Give that to Jonathan. Good afternoon. Hello, hello. Hello, hello. No, I don't hear anything. There we go. Thank you. We would like to call to order the meeting of the Riviera Beach Community Redevelopment Agency, May 26, 2021. Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Lawson. Commissioner Botel. Here. Commissioner McCoy.
Here.
Vice Chair Miller Anderson.
Present.
Chair Lanier.
Here.
Also present, Jonathan Evans, CRA Executive Director, Michael Haygood, General Counsel, and Tamara Sagan, CRA Clerk.
Thank you. We will have the invocation and a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Councilwoman Kashama Miller Anderson. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Seeing that we have only one item on the agenda for this evening, are there any additions, deletions, or substitutions for this agenda? Board, staff?
None from staff, Madam Chair.
Very good. Any disclosures? There's an item on the agenda, which is only one. Are there any disclosures by commission or staff in regards to this item? Can we get a motion to adopt this agenda?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. There is no consent agenda, which means we will run right into our item number one. Madam Clerk.
With
Do I have to do a
Hold on.
roll call for the agenda?
I'm sorry?
Agenda approval roll call.
adoption.
Oh, yes. Can I get approval of the agenda? Can you give me a roll call, please?
So moved.
We moved and seconded.
Commissioner
Ms. Mo-
Botel.
Yes.
Go. You gotta.
Commissioner McCoy.
McCoy, yes.
Vice Chair Miller Anderson.
Present.
Chair Lanier.
Yes.
Chair Lanier.
Yes.
And that motion carries.
Yes, please make note that Commissioner Lawson has joined the dais.
Were you gonna let them vote?
You don't have voting rights.
Sir, you would like to vote on the agenda? Approval?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. That's a yes from Commissioner Lawson. Item number one, Madam Clerk.
11th Street Townhouse Project.
Mr. Evans?
Madam Chair and members of the board, the item before you this evening, the presentation will be made by our Neighborhood Services Director, Ms. Anita Jenkins. The intent behind this particular item is to get feedback on the proposed development agreement that's before you for consideration this evening. It is staff's intent that once the feedback is provided, the staff will go back and refine the document and then bring the document forward for your consideration to allow for the project to move forward as previously discussed. Madam Chair, at this time, I'd like for our Neighborhood Services Director, Ms. Anita Jenkins, to make the presentation.
Thank you. Ms. Jenkins?
Thank you, Chair Lanier. Thank you, Mr. Evans. I'm Anita Jenkins, the Director of Neighborhood Services at the CRA. And tonight, I am presenting to you a summary of our development agreement and hoping that we can get some feedback, as Mr. Evans said, on some key points. We're providing this summary and draft development agreement for the 11th Street Townhouse project as we promised on last month. We'll come back hopefully at our first meeting in June for approval of the development plan, a draft of which is attached as attachment 2. And let me apologize up front for any typos in the draft. Your final document will be execution ready, but with any draft going back and forth among parties and track changes, sometimes typo may be missed. At the February 2021 board meeting, project support of $925,000 was approved for this program, for this initiative, pursuant to resolution number 2021-03, which was attached to the packet as well. The owners of the project would be the Riviera Beach CRA and Riviera Beach Community Development Corporation. The developer would be an entity to be formed by RBCC and Riviera Beach CRA. The project manager we're proposing is the CDC. We've outlined the roles for the parties, wherein the CDC would be the project lead, offering day-to-day management, reporting, invoice processing and reimbursements, site inspection, overview, sales, marketing, purchaser, processing and packaging, and development financing. The CRA would be responsible for invoice review, report review, marketing, site inspections, overview, and development financing. We've listed the individual parcels that will be comprised of our development parcel located at 1101 Avenue E, 130 West 11th Street, and 120 West 11th Street. The project description is our opportunity to construct the 11th Street Townhouse project, a development partnership between the agency and the Riviera Beach CDC. This assemblage would support 12 townhouses, 4 sale units with 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, 2 and 3 stories, 1 and 2 car garages. Our target prices for our workforce units would be $275,000 approximately, with an approximate square footage of 1,584 to 1,814 square feet for the 2 types of models. The agency and CDC have full site control. Our estimated budget for the project is $3,800,000. We've assembled, we think, a stellar development team with Anita Jenkins as project lead, Scott Evans responsible for planning, Andre Lewis is our project liaison on the CRA side, Manoka Nugent as the project accounting and responsible for packaging, Mr. Rick Gonzalez with REG Architects as our principal architect, and you've heard from him at several meetings. Christine Merrill is part of the REG team, is a project manager for this. Vlad Dimitrescu is an architect on the team. Our senior planner for landscape design is Alec Dickerson with Gentile Glass Holloway Mahoney. And Todd McLeod is our principal engineer with McCarthy and Associates. Gino Furlan is our surveyor with PM Surveying. Craig H. Butterfield, our appraiser. And our proposed construction financer is the Florida Community Loan Fund. The attorney for the CRA is Mr. J. Michael Haygood, and the CDC's counsel is Edwin Ferguson, who is present here tonight, a local attorney. A summary of our development agreement. As I mentioned earlier, the parties to the agreement would be the Riviera Beach CRA and the Riviera Beach CDC. The effective date would be the date of execution by the last party. The commencement date would be upon receipt of permits. Our closing date would be the date on which the construction loan is closed. Our completion date is 18 months from date of commencement. Our conceptual site plan is attached as attachment 2A. Our housing mix we propose is workforce housing, 8 units, Our market rate units, which are the larger units, would be 4 homes. The security for the construction phase would be a mortgage and note, a restrictive covenant during construction period, and at completion, the restrictive covenant remains, and I'll come back to that and explain a little bit more later. The terms during the construction period would be no more than 25 years for the end buyer, and I'll explain that a little bit more later. The rate of the loan from the CRA is at 0%. Our inspections would happen upon request for payment and at least weekly to make sure that the project continues to move forward. Reporting to the agency would be at 60 days of final sale and then annually by October 1 of each year. The ultimate job creation would be 3 FTEs. Our marketing, we would follow HUD's affirmative marketing per HUD guidelines. The homes would be energy efficient with star rated or higher appliances, low VOC paint, sustainable flooring, impact windows and doors, tankless water heaters, LED lighting, and xeriscape horticulture. Indemnification would be offered by the developer. Bonding would be in the form of a performance bond from our general contractor, and insurance would be general limits as required by the agency. Sales criteria for buyers. Eligible applicants are required to submit a completed application. The application must be submitted with required documents as specified on the application. Applicant eligibility is based upon property eligibility, and income eligibility is program specific. And I attached as Exhibit A an outline of the program guidelines. The homeowner applicants are required to occupy the property as their primary residence. And upon sales, the workforce buyers would execute a second mortgage and note along with a restrictive covenant. There would be a restrictive covenant executed for all 12 units. Applicants are selected and approved on a first come, first qualified, first served basis. Applicants are time-stamped, and determinations of application submittals will be based on the timestamp. We propose that a homeowner association would be formed to ensure that the project is maintained and that there is a responsible entity for the appearance of the development. I took the liberty of outlining some frequently asked questions that we hope will further explain the development agreement. Firstly, why pose a restrictive covenant? We're proposing to you that a restrictive covenant be placed on the property to ensure that the investment is maintained by the CRA and the CDC. This is done to maintain affordability and stave off gentrification as much and as long as possible. We are suggesting 25 years for the restrictive covenant period for the workforce units, and we're proposing that part of the restrictive covenant would be in perpetuity for home ownership, which means that no rentals would be allowed, and that this would apply to the market and the workforce units. That means that you won't have an investor putting in those short-term rental types of arrangements in the neighborhood. I also did some research, and I have outlined for you types of restrictions that other jurisdictions have for their affordable/workforce programs. The Palm Beach County Workforce Housing Program imposes a 15-year restriction for homeownership and 30 years for rental. All other housing programs in Palm Beach County, the First Mortgage Loan Program, the Purchase Assistance, which will be close to what we're doing, the housing rehab, emergency repairs, replacement housing, developer assistance, single-family new construction, and home investment partnership programs all have a 30-year restrictive covenant period. The City of Delray's first-time homeowner program imposes a 15-year restrictive covenant if there's less than $35,000 in subsidy. For more than $35,000, it is 30 years. The City of Boynton Beach, for their closing costs and down payment assistance, is 15 years. Fort Lauderdale's purchase assistance program is 15 years, but it's a deferred loan to the applicant. Broward County Housing Finance has a homebuyer purchase assistance program that is 15 years, and they defer up to $40,000. Thereafter, the rest incurs a repayment. The City of Gainesville's purchase rehab program is 30 years, due on sale with a forgivable loan. Miami-Dade County's program, a surtax program, is 20 years with a 0.5% interest payback and a due on sale clause. Another question, will the property require a unity of title and/or a replat? Yes, it will. We have 3 separate parcels. In order to develop one project, we'll have to go through a unity of title and replat procedure. When will any transfer or disbursement take place? The CRA's dollars will not be transferred or any part disbursed until there is a closing on the construction loan. There was a question last month about making sure that the project moves forward, is financing in place, etc. Once the project is fully underwritten and a construction loan is secured and ready for closing, everything will close at the same time. And that ensures that the project is ready to move forward. What are the benefits to the community? As I mentioned, we expect 3 FTE construction and permanent jobs, 12 workforce market rate homes with long-term affordability, the elimination of slum and blight, a key priority. And we think that this project will be a catalytic project in a transitional neighborhood. You might ask, what is the financing structure? The CDC will acquire a construction loan for the majority of the financing for the project. The CRA's dollars will come in as a subordinate construction loan, and those 2 together will finance the construction of the project. At sale, the buyers will obtain their individual mortgages, which will allow us to retire the first construction loan, and any proceeds that might result at the end of the project will be provided as down payment and closing cost assistance to our workforce units. Our status is that we're in the site plan approval process with the City of Riviera Beach, and if approved tonight, the agreement will be available and ready at your meeting on June 9th. So based on your comments, staff is recommending that the board direct general counsel and the executive director of the agency to bring back the final development agreement with attachments for approval at the next board meeting. And I'll stop there and see if you have questions or comments. And Mr. Haygood is here to answer any legal questions, and the CDC's counsel is here, Mr. Edwin Ferguson as well. So thank you.
Madam Chair.
Thank you for your presentation. Are there any questions from the board? Yes, Councilman McCoy, you may ask your questions.
Commissioner McCoy sounds better. This is CRA.
Councilman McCoy, Commissioner McCoy.
I'll take
Commissioner McCoy.
Ms. Jenkins.
Call you what I want.
Mr. McCoy.
Well, I feel good to be called on. Ms. Jenkins, so I want to clarify, the 925 is what the CRA's commitment is to this project. I think I've seen with a 0% rate. So at what point will the CRA ever be repaid? Because I thought I just heard you say any proceeds will go towards first time, I guess, some sort of home buyer assistance.
There is no cash repayment to the CRA. This is an investment in creating affordable workforce housing units.
Okay, and that's actually, I can understand that in theory, but the idea that we're gonna reinvest it back, is that gonna be done at the CDC or at the CRA? Because you said any proceeds will go back into home buyer assistance programs. Is that gonna go back into the CRA's home buyer assistance program or the CDC?
It goes home buyer assistance to the 12 units or to the workforce units, which are 8 units. It would go to those buyers.
Okay, but I thought I heard you say any proceeds that are received, I guess above whatever the construction cost loan is,
Yes.
that money is gonna go back into the same loan? How is that possible? Am I understanding that correctly?
There is a construction phase, so we need dollars to build the units, and the CRA is helping to subsidize the construction of the units. When we identify buyers and the buyers buy the units, in order to have workforce residents participate in the program and qualify for the price of these units, they will require subsidy in order to do that. And the security or guarantee for the CRA is that those buyers will execute a second mortgage. This is a typical structure for workforce affordable housing programs.
Okay, so am I missing something? I'm trying to find out what the any proceeds portion that you mentioned means. Like, you mean in excess of our satisfaction with the construction loan?
Once all construction expenses are taken care of, then if we're, hopefully we'll be able to pay off the first mortgage, which is a multi-million-dollar mortgage, pay any outstanding expenses. Once that is done, then those dollars will be used to subsidize the buyers.
But, okay, so that will be done at the CDC level, or will that come back to the CRA? Is what I'm saying. I'm just trying to figure out, once we put in the 900,000, anything above that satisfies the construction loan, does that go back to the CRA or to the CDC?
It will stay in the construction fund. Keep in mind.
But if the
that-
project's already completed, then we're
But-
going to use that money then to.
But in order to close out construction, you have to sell the units. And to sell them, you have to close with the buyer. The buyer can't close and assume title unless they pay for the unit. So if I may give an example, for someone who is at a workforce income level, they might qualify for $200,000 in a first mortgage. They would need $75,000, to keep the math simple, to assist them in purchasing the unit. So if we have proceeds left after we pay off the first mortgage, pay all of the expenses, then we could help to provide some down payment assistance to buyers, and it's based on need.
Okay, well, I guess I didn't understand what you meant by any proceeds, and that's what I was trying to get at. So this is the proceeds above our construction costs is going to go towards paying for
Down payment assistance.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm sorry it took a bit to get there. The restrictive covenant on all 12 units. You want to come back to that, or?
Sure. Well, did you have a question?
Well,
or?
I guess when I first suggested that perhaps we can look at market rate, I don't know if someone wants to pay market rate, are they going to pay for a restrictive covenant? I thought it would be a good mix of affordable and market rate as opposed to just all affordable, but I don't know that anybody would want to, obviously if they want a new townhome, they would, but want to buy a market rate townhome that has a 30-year restrictive covenant. It does absolutely no benefit to them, especially if they're not going through to get any of the first-time home buyers assistance. So I guess, in my opinion, it wouldn't make sense to even have that whole restrictive covenant in this place, or we just decided to do everything workforce housing?
Doing everything, that's a good point, and we might be there in terms of making them all workforce if we're not able to sell market rate. But the median price of a home in the county right now is approaching $450,000. So I think our project would be very attractive. I've had inquiries from several market rate buyers already who've heard presentations at our meetings.
Right, but are they aware that what's being, generally speaking, in theory, what's being discussed is a restrictive covenant for 30 years?
They know that we have not suggested terms because you all haven't approved anything. So we haven't discussed or suggested terms to anyone.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes, go ahead, sir.
through you. So the restrictive covenant, there were two restrictive covenants that we were proposing. The first is restrictive covenant on leasing any unit. That it can only be owner occupied, you can't lease it. And that, in theory, we are proposing is in perpetuity. So it's regardless of whether you have a workforce housing unit or whether you have a market rate unit, you would not be able to, the proposal is that you would not be able to lease it. And that's not really unique to this type of development. Especially with Airbnbs now, you find a lot of developments where you don't allow short or long-term leasing. So it really has nothing to do with the workforce housing issue. The second restrictive covenant is to have certain units be required to be leased to workforce housing. Those would only be the 8 units that we're suggesting as workforce housing. And I think the proposal for that was like 25 years. So after 25 years, the restriction on the unit as far as being income restricted would go away. However, the proposal again is that it would, in perpetuity, you would not be able to own it, be able to lease it. Now again, that's a decision for the board to make, whether it's going to be in perpetuity, whether you want it to expire within a certain period of time.
Follow up.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
So members, that's a great point, and thank you for the clarification. So it is in perpetuity what's being proposed that it can never be leased, and only for the first 25 years that you have to have a mixed use of some workforce component.
Correct.
Now, my concern is, if that's what we want to do, I'm okay with it. But members, we wear 3 hats, and on the city side, we seen something last month where an individual who has a restrictive covenant on their property brought an item before the city council for us to consider removing that restrictive covenant. And, I just don't want to start down this road of, if we did it on the CRA, then somebody's going to come back and say, well, I'm going to bring this item to the board's attention that if, they did it in 2021, so in 2029, then of course, I might as well roll the dice and try to bring it before the CRA to see if they'll release that. And all I'm saying is, members, we don't want to be hodgepodge. If we're going to set forth a restrictive covenant, it needs to be followed to the T, because the very definition is restricted for a reason.
Now, of course,
Hold on a second, sir. I just wanted to remark to your question, Mr. Councilman McCoy, Commissioner McCoy. Now, I'd like to see 10 or 15 years on restrictive covenants.
For which part? It's 2.
For the part in terms of the housing purchase. Because see, what it is that I would rather see a shorter term for a restrictive covenant, but rather do something like a resale restriction for affordability for subsequent buyers. Maybe 15 years, something that's similar to the NSP HUD program, the Neighborhood Stabilization Program that they have. And it basically allows you to sell in a shorter time, but it requires it to be a sale to another affordable home buyer. And this stops gentrification.
Our restrictive covenant would have the same effect.
Is it just like, is it the 15-year HUD program, Neighborhood Stabilization Program?
It's not the same as that, and there are arguably there are issues with the way that was implemented.
Well, I just would rather see 10 or 15 years on a restrictive covenant instead of these 25 and 30 years. And we have other things in place to ensure that if there's going to be a resale of the property, it is to another affordable home buyer. But to have someone locked in for 30 years, and as Commissioner McCoy alluded to, they could come back to the council in 5 years, and we all could be gone, and they could say, we want you to consider taking this off. So I want us to look at how we would be able to ensure, number one, if there is a shorter term on a restrictive covenant, that it is in turn sold to another affordable housing buyer.
If I may respond.
Yes, but hold that 1 second. Mr. Haygood wanted to say something.
Only that, as far as the discretion is concerned, you always want to have a opportunity for, in this case, the restrictive covenant would be in the name of the CRA. The CRA is ultimately going to sunset, so all that will be assumed by the city. For property purposes, you always want to have a way of being able to waive a restrictive covenant. And again, I think it's important to remember that we're suggesting two, what you call restrictive covenants, or another legal restriction, that we're talking about two restrictions. One is on the ability of someone to lease the property, regardless of whether it's a market rate unit or if it's a workforce house unit. You cannot lease that property short or long term. Now, again, we have proposed that that would be in perpetuity. The board obviously has the authority, the policy decision to make of whether to make that shorter or not. But even then, you still want to have written into the document that it's at the discretion of the person who gave the covenant to waive it. And then again, the second restriction, and that's on the actual income level of the people who rent the units, the workforce units. We're talking about 8 units. That those would be workforce restricted to sale of persons qualified under workforce housing requirements.
Thank you. Ms. Jenkins, you had a comment too? Yes, go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. I was just going to explain that in the document, we described how the restrictive covenant would work. A person could sell the unit at any time. If you are a similarly situated buyer, say you qualify for a workforce unit, if the first homeowner sells the unit within 5 years, then we either get all of our money back and the second restriction remains, or if you sell it to somebody who's situated, then you pass on that benefit, and it works just like the NSP program that you're describing. If it's after 5 years, then there's a pro rata payback where the mortgage and note, like with the NSP, it burns off, so it's a proportionate payback. We still have our second restrictive covenant. So with the passing the benefit on to a subsequent purchaser would work the same way as you're describing with the NSP program. This way, it ensures that our program is in line with other programs in the county. Some of the buyers might have to get ship money or something. It would be in line with those. And we're still encouraging people to move up. You know, this may be your first home. If it is, then your first-time home buyer, then you could sell it and you will realize some equity on the sale. But the investment that's put in by the CRA and to the CDC will be protected. And that's what we're trying to do, is provide protection. Other jurisdictions that are laid out here that are doing 10 years, 15 years, they're also, they have a payback. Most of them have some payback. The second mortgage will accrue interest. We're not setting up anything as elaborate as that, because we don't have the mechanism at the CRA of the city to service all that. But we still would get the protection to make sure that we have home ownership and that that project stabilizes that neighborhood. I understand what you're saying, but this would do the same thing.
I now understand what you're saying. So I want to see 10 to 15 years for restrictive covenants. That's what I would like to see.
Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
For the 25-year, it says the maximum funding is up to $100,000 average, correct?
Yes.
So we're saying the $100,000 would have, that's the one that would have the 25 years forgivable at a rate of 5%? And that's the one you're saying you want to see at 10 to 15 years?
I'm just talking about purchase in general. That when a person purchases, they say they have two restrictive covenants, one for the purchase of the property and the other for the restriction of leasing the property. Am I correct?
Yes.
So when a person purchases the property, I would like to see 10 or 15 years for a restrictive covenant when they purchase that property, so that, number one, it doesn't lock them into 25 years. But if they want to sell the property in year number one, they have to pay it back. We do understand that. But I would like to see those numbers come down some, based on the fact that there is another caveat that you can put in terms of resale restriction, meaning that if they do want to resell it, they do want to sell it, it would have to be to someone who's also a affordable housing buyer. And the reason why I say that is because what that does is, it, regardless of how when they sell, it goes to another person who is an affordable housing buyer, and that in itself limits gentrification.
May I respond?
Go ahead.
In that case, a subsequent, either the CRA would have to come up with additional subsidy for that subsequent purchaser to be able to afford the unit, or we set this up with a 10 to 15 year restriction where there is a shared equity portion. Otherwise, at the end of 10 or 15 years, every one of those units would convert to a market rate unit. So workforce would not be able to afford it. And I'm saying that from experience with the NSP program and any other program. So if you are suggesting the 10 to 15 years, yes, where it's sold to a similarly situated buyer, either the restriction starts over, and there is some shared equity between CRA and the first buyer, because otherwise.
No, and I understand what you're saying, because what you're saying is that if this burns off in 10 or 15 years, and it reverts to market rate, that is what the CRA's purpose is. The purpose is to bring in, to work in blighted areas and to bring it to market rate, to bring it to what people can afford to live there, to bring it to people who are able to afford it. So if we do 10 or 15 years for people and giving them subsidy, they keep the property all good. But if they sell the property and it goes to somebody else who is a market rate property, then that's fine as well with me. Because that's our purpose. Our purpose is to build the community. We don't want to stay stagnant and it just becomes an affordable housing unit. It becomes something that is going towards something. And the person who is living there and now is at that level. So I would like to see 10 or 15 years, I would like to see where if they sell, if it burns off, it goes to another person who's an affordable housing buyer. And of course, I like the part where it talks about they cannot do short-term and long-term leases for the property.
Do you want us to put in a shared equity provision for the CRA? Because otherwise.
Explain that to me.
That means that because incomes don't go up the way real estate appreciates, And because we know that our median income in Riviera Beach right now is about 50% of the median income of the county, if we were to do projections of a conservative property appreciation, incomes will not keep up. So Ms. Brown, just to use a generic name, who could afford the unit today with subsidy, stays in there for 10 years. They want to sell it. Prices have gone up, and in today's market, they are going through the roof.
Right.
So a unit that we're projecting, we want to sell for $275,000 today with subsidy, at that rate will be, Commissioner Lawson, help me, maybe over $500,000 in 10 years. Someone whose income might go up 1.5% a year will not be able to afford it.
So then we give the next
building-
home buyer subsidy.
Ma'am?
Then we give the next home buyer subsidy.
So that's fine if the CRA is going to commit to providing subsidy for any subsequent purchaser. We'd have to have subsidy available.
We would want the CRA to provide that subsidy.
That would be fabulous.
Because if a person stays there 10 years or 15 years and it burns off, and the next person comes in, needs help to get into that unit, then that's fine as well. But we want to be able to maintain a housing stock that is not depreciating in terms of, now the unit is worth $100,000. We want to keep it where it is for lack of a better term, a status that the person has, gotten this apartment, gotten this a unit, and, now they bought it at, 257, 2 years ago, and now 8 years is worth 500. That is the purpose of making sure that we are keeping up with the market as well, but also the people who live in this city can afford to live in there too. So if the next person comes in and we have to subsidize them, then they take on the same risk in terms of restrictive covenants, 10, 15 years. They do the same thing the previous person did.
Madam Chair. So, but in that current situation that you're saying, if we're going to subsidize the subsequent, or I guess the second buyer, then essentially we would be only investing in that same property. We would never, ever create any other pockets of affordable housing throughout the CRA. I mean, that sounds good in theory, but I wouldn't want to re-subsidize the same property that we've already subsidized before. So that's my own.
So you're saying that when she said that the person comes in, now it's 500,000. So, and I had said initially, well, then that's just what it is.
Right, but then somebody walks off with a $300,000 profit, and then we're, the CRA, I guess the constituents are now going to be subsidizing somebody to get up to pay what the now market
But
rate?
how would they walk off with that?
With the appreciation. Because if you're only paying $275 now and you sell for $500, I mean, you're going to appreciate.
Right, but I'm saying, but they still have to pay back the subsidy.
Right, but it's on a pro rata. And that's my other question is who gets that pro rata? So, I mean, somebody literally can, exactly what we started off with, I don't want this to be somebody's method to flip houses.
Exactly.
And they do take advantage, and I'm telling you, while we right here talking, somebody's plotting. And quite frankly, if we do it the first time, I don't see that. I don't support us going back to reinvest another subsidy in the same property when we can go down on the north side of Blue Heron and try to do something in that area. But, I understand what you're saying, but, we...
Well, we provide subsidies to the CDC year after year after year, so, but I understand what you're saying. I get that. I get the fact that we don't want somebody to walk off with the profit and then the next person we dump the same money
And
back
they're gonna look for us, but,
I see.
and I know there's a couple things, but, Ms. Jenkins, when you can respond back, the pro rata share, even though the deed would then, in the event that the CRA is dissolved, that would then be continued by the city, the pro rata share of the payback goes to whom? The CDC or the?
It would go to the city.
But you know what, though? Let me stop you right there. But you know what, though? I was thinking about this as well. If you make it, you keep it at affordable housing rate, they don't have to necessarily get the money from us.
Well, if they don't, then.
You see what I mean? It doesn't have to come from us to subsidize that unit. It can come from the county. But my whole point in this is that I would like to see 10 or 15 years for restrictive covenants. That's just in general. But we can, I don't want to hold this project up, that's the first thing. But I want to be able for us to work through this so that we can come to a agreement in terms of what is best for the people who live in this city. We can't pay for everybody, but we at least can provide the opportunity for people to be able to live nice and decent in this city.
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So there was a comment made about long and short-term leases. I think Councilwoman Lanier said she didn't want to see any leases. We're not allowing for anything investors in these properties. This is just owner occupants, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the lease terms, that will be restrictive in our HOA documents to say there'll be no lease allowance in this area.
Yes,
All right, we've had some comments tonight in reference to staving off gentrification, but I really want my colleagues to understand that gentrification is here. We have $1 million condos being built on the corner of Broadway and Silver Beach in an area that just 10 years ago was something that had to be cleaned up. A city that we've talked about development and growth for a number of years, but right now it's actually happening before our eyes. And the only thing that we can do as policymakers is be prepared for the development that's coming. And gentrification is here and happening, but we have to do it without displacement and creating more home ownership. If we reduce that restrictive covenants from 25 years down to 15 years, that is going to just leave one generation out of having any restrictions of home ownership, of owner occupants, of the restriction of the type of ownership of this property. And we need to make sure that we lock in this unit in this location as long as possible for owner occupants. The funding was my question, Ms. Jenkins, last night. We spoke for about an hour in reference to this project and getting all the insight, so I appreciated your time with explaining every detail of it. But the funding that Councilman McCoy mentioned as to where the profits are going to go after the loan is paid off is going to go into the CDC or the CRA, because that was the concern. If the cost of development cost $1 million and the project brings in $2 million, where does that additional $1 million in revenue go?
Because we are doing this as a mixed income project for workforce and market, based on today's market and projection for the next 12 or 18 months, there won't be any quote, and I don't like to use the word profit with a nonprofit, there will be no program income. Any program income will go to the home buyers to assist them.
Okay.
And when you talk about assisting them, paying off all the loans and expenses, we already know that our projected construction costs are already close to what our sales prices are. So we're subsidizing the project, and we know that for someone to be able to afford it, they're going to need every piece of subsidy plus other dollars. But if there is any program income, then that would come back to the CRA.
So that comes back to the CRA, and then those funds will be used for what?
For future workforce housing. You set aside this money in a pot called special initiatives, which allow for property acquisition, similar developments within the CRA. So it would go into that program line item.
Okay.
Well, I'm sorry. I thought I asked that same question.
Hold on, Councilman
Gave me a
McCoy.
different answer.
That was the confusion, because Councilman McCoy asked a similar question. Your answer wasn't reflective of what he asked, 'cause I know we had the conversation. So when I spoke to you last night and what you answered, it wasn't actually clear. So that's why I want to make sure that it was clarified.
Through the
So I
chair.
apologize for any confusion.
Hold on a second. Councilman McCoy, Commissioner McCoy, what was the question you asked him?
So my question, I said, where does the proceeds go? And you said back to the CDC, and then I think just now.
The question you were asking about construction financing, and I said from construction to sales, we have to close out the entire project. When the first buyer buys a house, we have to make sure we're able to sell all 12. And at the end of the day, you pay off the remainder of the construction loan, and expenses. So perhaps I didn't go far enough in my question, and I'm not giving you a different answer. I talked about construction versus permanent financing or sales and the difference there.
Thank you.
Okay, very good.
Mr.
Mr. Hager?
The only thing I wanted to point out so that the board knows, you're actually making two contributions to the project. One is the $925,000 of funds, which is going to be either used to subsidize your construction cost and or if any of the proceeds going to use to subsidize first-time home buyer closing costs. The second one is you're donating 2 lots. So there were 2 lots that were required that we are, in theory, selling to the CDC for the project, contributing to the CDC for the project.
Contributing.
Contributing.
Okay. All right, very good. That brings me to another question.
Madam Chair, I was just going
I'm
to see if I
sorry,
could
go
finish
ahead.
my comments earlier.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No worries. Ms. Jenkins, we talked about the owner occupants, only being able to sell to owner occupants. The restrictions of rental restrictions and owner occupancy will be outlined in the association documents. Now, there's going to be a property management or association that's going to handle the project once we get a CO for these projects and start closing on these units, correct?
Once the project is stabilized, yes, sir.
What do you mean by that, stabilized?
Well, once the developer, the CDC, would, and the general contractor would take care of any punch list items, make sure that everything is closed, that people are settled in, make sure that construction loan is paid off, that all reports are done, that there's a closeout, a total closeout.
Right.
And once that's done, it'll be turned over to the property management and the HOA.
Okay.
Well, you will have an HOA in place because they're going to be there, but in terms of the management of the HOA will be done by us, the developer, and then turned over to the
Owners.
HOA board, which will be the owners there.
At what percentage will you turn it over? For example, developers, they transfer the home ownership, the HOA management to the homeowners when we have 65, 75% completion, 85%. At what time will it be turned over to the property owners?
Because in this document, we're contemplating that we have other reporting requirements to the CRA that are outlined here, I would suggest or propose that it's at 100% of sales
Okay.
when we totally close out the project.
Will the board have the ability to overturn the process of rental restrictive covenants?
No.
Okay.
Mr. Haygood and Mr.
I think that
Ferguson will
the
make
attorneys,
sure.
I would want to make sure that that language is crystal clear when we do that contract with the association, especially when it's turned over to the homeowners.
Yes,
Because
sir.
if you have homeowners that come into an agreement that they want to make it rental or vacation rental or see the Marina Phase 2 come to fruition, then that could be a concern and sticky situation. So I want to make sure that board that's put in place, that we have language in the documentation that is going to safeguard and protect them from overturning or changing that process. Because we can't control the management, the operations, the landscaping, the color of the paint with that HOA unless we have that completely outlined within the docs.
Madam Chair, through you.
Yes,
So-
go ahead, sir.
So there are 2 ways that you can set up these restrictive covenants.
Mm-hmm.
One is typically done through the HOA, as you alluded to. But in this case, we're going to put the restrictive covenants in place before any of this happens. So as far as the no leasing, our proposal is to put that in place ahead of time, and actually, rather than the HOA having the authority to enforce it, the CRA or its assignee, successor interest, the city would be able to enforce it.
Okay.
Now, and I will caution the board that even though we come up with this development agreement, it's going to be subject to some negotiations with the lender. Linda may have some issues with some of the provisions, especially as it relates. Well, typically there's some negotiations subsequent to once you go to the construction lender. There'll also be a construction participation agreement, which we will identify what CRA funds are being used for. And that'll be in the source and uses agreement that will be agreed to by the board.
Okay. Madam Chair, I have a few more comments, but I'll let my colleagues go ahead and.
Yes, let's give somebody.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
We've been talking, let's give someone else another chance to talk. Any other comments from any other board members in regards to this project? No.
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
On the Special Initiatives Program, it talked about the impact of 10 to 15 households will be assisted. So this program will apply to other areas outside of this project here? Where do you get 15 from?
It's just estimated based on the money. At the time you all approved this, well, we contemplated the 11th Street, but it allowed that not everybody might need $100,000 for subsidy. So if we're able to find other sources to assist the buyer, then we may be able to assist additional households. We might. But we're
On different
asking
locations,
that-
at different locations?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
okay, all right. I don't really support the 10 to 15 years. 25, I know that's what we're saying. The lowest I would go is 20, but as we've listened and learned through this discussion that of some of the things that could happen, that could put us in a situation that we really don't want to be in later on down the line, I wouldn't want to go below 20 if we're going to change it. I'm fine with the 25, but if we have to go down below, I wouldn't want to go below 20. And then the other thing is with the job creation, I mean, obviously it's not a whole lot, but will there be any outreach? What is the outreach plan going to be like?
As we said earlier, we would, whichever contractor we hired for this job, we'd make sure that we reached out to the community for the construction jobs, whatever supplies, et cetera. We'd look for local suppliers, local businesses, local subs to participate. We'd work with the city, with the procurement department, making sure that we're providing opportunity as local as possible. We've talked about with our HOA, we'd have an experienced property management company, but part of the negotiation with them is perhaps you might mentor or allow a smaller local property management company to shadow you so that perhaps they might be hired or take over or gain experience. So we'll make every effort to maximize whatever benefit we get from this project. The landscaping, hopefully, we'll identify a local company that could provide that service once the project is complete.
Okay. All right, that's it for now, thank you.
I just want to, yes, go ahead.
I'd just like to understand better how, by what criteria you chose 25 years as opposed to 10 or 15. What basis, what caused you to choose that?
Just based on experience, if it were my recommendation alone, I'd ask for 30 years, but based on the comments over the last few meetings from commissioners, we're suggesting at least 25. The county, for just about all of their programs, they're at 30 years. Mm-hmm. If you rent in a low-income housing tax credit project, they have a 65, sometimes a 65-year restriction, income restriction, to make sure that it's affordable, but that's rental. But 30 years is not unheard of. There are some funding sources that require 40 years restriction, and it's to avoid gentrification. as much as you can.
I would think that we wouldn't want to go much lower than 25 years then.
Right.
Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead, sir.
So, Mr. Jenkins, with your experience, let's just kind of speak on a hypothetical, because at 15 years, if buyer A wants to sell to buyer B, who doesn't necessarily qualify for workforce, to be considered workforce housing, who makes that determination after the sale? Like, who's going to manage or monitor whether or not the second buyer does essentially meet that definition of workforce?
Part of the CDC's requirements are to do annual reporting on the affordability back to the CRA. We would do something that the county does, that they do other jurisdiction, where there is a process, and people know this up front, where maybe there's a certified letter where people have to affirmatively attest that their income is such that they still reside in the property. Here is my homestead exemption. So there's a reporting requirement. If and when the CDC goes away, our bylaws say that there is a subsequent nonprofit that takes over, or our whatever obligations we have passes on to some other nonprofit. Or the city may do it. You all in the city have homes that were assisted by the city, where people they are coming out of their restrictive period, they're refinancing, they're selling the properties. And I actually assisted the city recoup some money on one of those deals, where the period had not totally burned off. And in order for that person to sell, they had to pay back the city. It was $5,000, but they had to pay back the city a couple years ago. So the CDC, and that's why you have organizations like the CDC that are here for that purpose for the city.
Madam Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
I just want clarification. On Article 11, indemnification, 11.01, A, it says for consideration of $10 and other good and valuable consideration herein. What is that part about for $10?
It's to the chair.
Huh?
It's just standard.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
It's just standard. I would say almost ceremonial language.
The $10?
So, yes.
So you just pick a number?
Well, it's a nominal consideration.
Okay.
It's hard to explain, but typically in most
Well,
documents,
try to explain it to us.
I can't. I don't
It's in the
I can't.
contract?
It's something ceremonial that's typically you'll see in
Ma-
documents.
Madam Chair, it's normally documented as $1 because you have to convey a certain dollar
So that's the
amount
dollar
completed.
that we
That's-
typically see.
That's $1 that you normally say. I don't know why they did 10, but it's
Okay,
normally
I'm used to $1, but.
Yeah, I'm used to $1, but
Yeah, me too. That's why I was just wondering why it was,
Yes.
what was the 10 about? Okay, thank you.
All right, very good. I want to ask a question about, do we actually need a HOA when all of the restrictions are in the agreement?
Oh, you definitely.
Yes, ma'am, we need an HOA. You want to make.
Why?
You want to make sure that the units are not being painted different colors. You want to make sure that the lawn is being maintained. You want to make sure that the driveway is maintained. You want to make sure that the roofs are always in good shape. You want to make sure that the insurance is paid for the exterior, et cetera. We need an HOA for that.
Yeah, there are a lot.
Hold on a second, sir.
All right, I'm sorry.
So when you need the HOA, you need it for the purpose of appearances for the property?
For protection of the value. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, very good. Now, what's this gentleman here doing?
Madam Chair, I just wanted to follow up the question I believe that Commissioner McCoy asked regarding what happens if.
Please introduce yourself, sir.
Certainly. I'm Attorney Edwin Ferguson, attorney for the CDC.
Very good, go ahead.
So just wanted to state, as to that hypothetical that Commissioner McCoy asked about, what happens if Unit 1 that's owned by John Doe or Jane Doe, who are workforce employees, and now they want to sell it to someone who does not qualify as a workforce employee. What happens? What type of restrictions or what type of assurance would you have to make sure that this property does not go to somebody who's more affluent, who would gentrify the unit? Well, the HOA, that's part of what they would legally be authorized to do. They have to give you approval. As a general rule, every HOA that I've dealt with, I want to sell to you, for example, Commissioner. They have to approve that sale. So if in the governing documents, which attach to the property as well as any other restrictive covenant, it says that Unit 1 has to be sold to somebody else who also falls into this workforce housing spectrum, if you will, then I think it will be okay. There wouldn't be any risk of me as a workforce employee, if you will, selling to Mr. Rockefeller in 10 or 15 years, and then there not being any teeth or any way for the HOA to prohibit that.
So the HOA would do that. So when Commissioner McCoy asked who would do the details in terms of making sure that the units were sold to the appropriate people, it's not the CDC's going to do it, it's the HOA's going to do that?
Well, I think what Attorney Haygood mentioned before, if I followed him correctly, is that there would be a combination of the two, at least initially, but we're getting down, 15, 20, 25 years down the road. What I was representing to you is that the HOA would have the affirmative duty to make sure that the property is being sold to somebody who who does not offend the covenant or the restrictions or any other limitation that's set forth in what are called the governing documents that every homeowner association has that's recorded in the public records of Palm Beach County.
Okay, so that would be the HOA. And
Yeah, it sounds like there will be adequate safeguards from what's
but
been
it'll be
represented.
both, you're saying?
Yes, ma'am, it sounds like. Attorney Haygood.
It sounds like it would be both.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right, very good. Thank you, sir.
Madam Chair?
It's Mr. Haygood. He wanted to say something.
No, I'm good.
You good?
Is he at his 10 minutes?
Sorry?
I think she's checking your time.
She's checking your time.
Oh, no. Actually, if I can.
No, go ahead, sir.
No, actually, that's very interesting that Mr. Ferguson brought that up, because members, I had a constituent call us about something very unusual, and you may have gotten this, but there are, and I'm not going to be very specific, but I've seen where folks have complained to us that HOAs are doing exactly the opposite of what was just proposed here, saying that in order to buy in this community, you can't come into our community with a subsidy. You have to have
20%.
liquid cash of 20% of the sales price. So HOAs are pretty strong in that regard and being able to restrict who comes and buys in that community. But that is something that we're on this side talking about, how we're going to increase home ownership, and in other areas, private HOAs are basically saying, we want you to come in to buy in with your own equity, and you can't come in with the CRA or county subsidy. So that's, that's definitely different on one side of the tracks.
Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead, sir.
That is part of my concern with us reducing the restrictive covenants years, because, for example, that exact scenario is in our community right now, where they're requiring 20% down for home buyers to come into the complex. First-time home buyers can't afford that. Mostly investors and middle and wealthy can afford that 20%, where first-time home buyers are coming in with a minimum 3 to 5% down. So that restrictive covenants will give us kind of that leverage to keep these properties affordable, keep them within the limits of owner occupants, and we'll keep them where we can still provide and issue that subsidy on the units that are not market rate. I would be completely supportive of keeping it the 25, and if you would have presented the 30, I would have kept it there. But right now, with the 25, I would ask and plead with my colleagues that we've talked about gentrification, we've talked about development, we've talked about the real estate. We have to also talk about preserving and protecting the land and the limited land we have left, and allowing for our homeowners to take advantage of that beachfront, that waterfront property, and still make it affordable for them to live in there for the next 10, 20, 30 years. Because as I said before, a stone throw away from here, there's $1 million condos going up. So we want to make sure that our residents, our workforce residents, our community residents can actually still afford it. Ms. Jenkins, we talked about last night no preferential treatment, and we talked about transparent and unbiased sales. we want to make sure that the sales of these units go to the program. We didn't talk about the sale process, and tonight we're just talking about the covenants. We're talking about the agreement, but the sales of these units, I want to make sure that we're clear, because I'm sure this will come back before us again, before the CO is issued. We want to make sure that this process, and this is more of a statement, is transparent. We want to make sure that every unit is listed properly and it's sold, and we have a detailed outline of how it's sold, because we do not want to hear about how one of our friends or a buddy or somebody associated with the city got preferential treatment to come into this unit. So making sure that we have a detailed outline plan presenting to the board to show exactly how you're planning on selecting these buyers, how they're going to actually come in, and what qualification process they have to go through, so that we can make sure that with a clear conscience in mind that we are hands off, nothing to do with it, and these units go to the ones that rightfully deserve it. Because I do not want the community to come back to us saying, oh, well, so-and-so's cousin and friend or X, Y, and Z got this unit because they have preferential treatment. So that's why I want to make sure that process is outlined clear, so that when it comes to closing on these units, we can just be excited with the ribbon cutting and housewarmings. Okay?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Tell me, Ms. Jenkins, what are those 3 FTEs? What specific jobs are those?
The HOA might have a maintenance person, somebody who's there every day or part-time.
So the 3 FTEs are a maintenance person?
Or they may work for the property management company, you know, people from the community. So it will be associated with post-sales management.
So it's going to be 3 positions?
Approximately. And I did say, yes, ma'am.
And what are those?
Stop there.
I'm still not hearing what exactly are those positions.
It would be property management, landscaping, maintenance types of jobs.
Okay.
We don't have an office or a clubhouse or anything like that.
Okay. Very good. One other thing, the next time you come to the meeting, could you bring us a timeline that lays out, you know, when we start, the time frames that we're gonna
Yes, ma'am.
have this project go, so that we can kind of have in our mind how long this is going to take.
Yes, ma'am.
To get to the finish line here. And then there's also one other thing I want to say before I close out, is that when we talk about the CDC and we talk about the CRA, I am very confused about how all this is working. You know, there's a Florida statute that talks about, you know, receiving compensation from one organization versus the other. And it's just so convoluted to me. I don't want to get into it tonight, but I really want us to address the fact of how is it that you're the president of the CDC, but the CRA pays your salary. So on the CDC side, you report to Scott, but then on the city side, you report to Mr. Evans. It's all confusing to me. So I want us to be able to address that issue as we're moving this project along. And are there any other questions from the board in regards to this project?
Well, I guess what are we doing?
Wait until the next time.
Yeah, but I mean, they have to go back and do a draft, so are we gonna settle on what restrictive covenant, the length? We talked about 15, 10, 20.
We talked about 10, 15, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45. But it seems to be that, I mean, I wanted 10 to 15. There's a 20 on the table, so I can go with 20.
And just so we're clear, that's just for the being able to be occupied by someone that is in workforce. Actually, that's not true, because if a person actually is workforce and they get a large raise, I mean, we can't tell them that they no longer meet the requirements. That's just for the sale of
the property, right.
of the property.
Exactly. We're not going to kick them out or take it if they have increased, they get a big raise or something.
Yeah, okay, well.
Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
I would just think that we want that to be as long as possible, so that it remains workforce housing for as long as possible. That we could, if we can guarantee that a certain number of units remain workforce housing, that should be our objective. So 25 is a bare minimum.
Sure.
Very good.
Madam Chair?
So that means that there's a consensus for 25.
Yes, ma'am.
go ahead.
No, that's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, there's a consensus for 25, so we'll move forward with that.
There's not a consensus. I want to vote on it.
Very good.
No, I'm just kidding. 25 is fine.
Yeah.
And then, quite frankly, Madam Chair, so I guess you're concerned about the 10 to 15 years. If they have the issue, this ain't where you want to be. I mean, get a county subsidy and try somewhere else in the city, but this is the very purpose. And quite frankly, I think we owe that to
No. Listen, I understand that completely. My position is that a lot of times when we talk about, quote unquote, low income people, we always talk in terms of debt and not in terms of building equity for them. So when we talk about this length of time, I want it to be in a situation where the person is not old and, too old to be able to do what they need to do. I wanted to be able to think of, when I say low income in air quotes, because I want to think of it in terms of not having debt for them, but building equity for them. Because if they sell the unit in 10 or 15 years, they should make a profit. We should be able to try and help people to build equity and to be able to live better and better and better. That is the purpose. That is the American dream.
Yeah, but not on the backs of the subsidy.
But I'm saying I'm not saying that they're going to use our subsidy if it's 10 or 15 years and they've met the requirements. This is like a person who went to jail and gets out. They've paid their debt to society. So why are you trying to treat them like a person who has not? So if a person has gone through the process, they've satisfied their requirements in terms of what this restrictive covenant is, and they make a profit off of the unit because they came in as low income, then why not support building equity for low income people? But I say that and I digress.
Well, no. Actually, let me give you a reason why not.
No,
Because
you
price
can. Hold on, sir. I'm saying this. I'm not saying this to argue with you. I'm just saying that is the way I feel about it. I feel that if a person comes into the city of Riviera Beach, we give them $50,000 to be able to buy a home. They say, listen, you got to stay in that home for 15 years, 20 years, and once you stay in that house for 20 years, then guess what? That money that you owe us, you don't have to pay back because you've satisfied that. It's called a satisfaction when you pay off your debt, so to speak. So when they leave that unit after 15 or 20 years and now 25 years, and they want to sell that unit, and they make a, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 profit, what is wrong with that? Having a person to be able to build equity after 20 years, because we've helped them to get to that point, I don't see a problem with that. But I'm sure that you do.
Yeah, well, if I can respond, that's not correct, Madam Chair.
Okay, all right. Very good.
First of all, so 275, if that is the target sale price, that's surely going to be less than market rate. I mean, that probably at least is going to be 310, 315, because you're less than a quarter mile from the intercoastal. With some of these units, if I remember from my last site plan review, it's going to have some sort of ocean view. So, quite frankly, they're already coming in with buying less than what I believe it would appraise at. Additionally, I think there's something else, a couple other things that we have to talk about on the table, because I know initially you brought this back saying that it was proposed to have 8 workforce and 4 market rate, and I think I'm under the belief that we need to do all affordable after having this dialogue, because I just think the longer the better for the purposes of this, because I just can't see how someone would want to buy a property for close to $300,000 and then have that deed restriction. This isn't the property form, in my opinion. I think all of them have to be held as affordable, all 12 units. And that is what I would ask the members to support.
Madam Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
help me, what was the rationale by having the 8 and the 4?
We're making, there are 4 units that are like corner units that are larger. They have 2-car garages, and they're 3 stories, and right now they would have views of the water. And the cost of those, we're projecting would be around $330. Now, the way the market is going, it may come in higher. Construction prices, wood is 3 times what it was when we started this project. that would mean that to make it a workforce unit, you're talking about putting in 130,000 in subsidy, and that's just not done. Because the contribution in terms of that amount of subsidy would just, and for those units, from a policy standpoint, just setting some sort of precedent for bringing that for the CRA to put in that much at the table. The market rate units will also help us keep the other units affordable for people at lower incomes. So the design is meant to be mixed income there, if I may suggest so.
Right, okay, thank you.
Madam Chair?
Hold on one second.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Lawson. It's 7:25, and do we have public comments for this project?
We do, Madam Chair.
All right, very good. We're gonna go ahead and take your question, and we're gonna
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, not on this item, just general public comment.
just, okay, very good. Go ahead, Commissioner Lawson. Have you finished, Ms. Jenkins?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Lawson.
Madam Chair, I hear Councilman McCoy's, Commissioner McCoy's concerns in reference to the just doing all workforce, but I do think that we need to kind of make a mix of market rate and workforce units at this site, just because of the reasoning that Ms. Jenkins did give, and also by the time this construction is done, if this balloon that keeps blowing up gets any bigger and bigger and bigger, these units realistically could sell for $400,000 by the time this construction's over, because of how rapidly the market is growing. So I would say keep it at the market rate, and then allow for us to just keep a larger percentage, which is the 8 units, at the workforce rate, because those are going to be a little bit more attractive. Those are the end units, and that gives the opportunity to have a mixed area and just continue to keep the properties in the area diverse as well. Market rate is going to be at a certain number in the next 6 months to a year, but I think that would just kind of give the flexibility to that unit and make it more attractive to buyers, and also make it a diverse, very diverse community. So I kind of would want to keep it with the mix that they currently have proposed of 8 and 4. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, thank you, sir. Are there any other questions in regards to this project? But thank you so much, Ms. Jenkins, for your presentation for the CDC, for the CRA, for bringing this project to life. If we can get that timeline, that'll give us something to talk to the residents about in terms of knowing how this process actually works. And with that being said, we can call for public comments at this time. Thank you, Ms. Jenkins.
Thank you for your support.
Miss Mary Bram?
Oh, hold on a second. Let me read my statement here. Please be reminded that the CRA Board of Commissioners has adopted rules of decorum governing public conduct during official meetings, which has been posted at the front desk. In an effort to preserve order, if any of the rules are not adhered to, the Commissioner Chair may have any disruptive speaker or attendee removed from the podium, from the meeting and or the building if necessary. Please govern yourselves accordingly. Public comments shall begin at 7:30 unless there is no further business of the CRA, in which event it shall begin sooner. Any persons who would like to speak during public comments, please fill out a public comment card located at the front desk and give it to the staff before the public comment section is announced.
Miss Mary Bram?
Good evening, Ms. Mary Bram, Riviera Beach. I had a long day today, too, so I'm comfortable here today. I would just like to say, Attorney Haygood, I was sitting here listening as well as dialoguing in on some of his comments. I would advise you as elected officials to make sure that your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed. I totally agree with the CDC board, and it's nothing against Ms. Jenkins or anybody else. But it does become convoluted because it's tied in with the CRA. one right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. I was kind of taken aback when Attorney Ferguson stood up here, because we did not know that he was the attorney. You did not know, because you asked as chair, who are you? We cannot have this type of government that goes on where the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. And Scott Evans is the CDC. The CRA is a combined force here. And you as a board must work in conjunction as one cohesive board. This money that's going to be fielded out from the CDC with its funds and stuff, you all need to get on target, because we're going to get on target with this. And another thing I'm going to say too, they make mention about gentrification. Look, when these homes was built in the city here, we have some that took advantage of these homes and they tried to move out the houses. It should be from a 25 to a 30 lease. When we bought our homes, it shows structure, stability. It employs them to stay on their jobs if they want a roof over their heads. And for you all to try to think to make this 10 or 15 years, come on. We need to make this city be better in the ways that we can make it better. So we need to work on this, dot those I's and cross those T's, because it is some gaps that is here. Was the attorney filled it out for the CDC board, and it's nothing against no one. But we as the public and you as a governing board, you need to know these things here, how they're working here, because we getting convoluted here. On Sunday night, the event that was put on by the CRA and its staff, not one person never makes the wheel turns. It has to be a collective body that makes these wheels turn. The event on Sunday was magnificent. Bring that band back, because we enjoyed the band. Bring that band back. And thanks to Mr. Evans and his staff and the council people, all the council people. No one person have their hands in the pot. It's the cookie jar that like one person wants to eat on. Everybody makes the wheels turn.
Thank you, Ms. Brown.
Bishop Thomas Masters.
Thank you. Madam Chair, Honorable Mayor, Commissioners. Ms. Graham, you may remember when we were in that position, we did have that band almost every other month. It's a good band to have, and they're local. Let me announce that the funeral service for Earl Davis, community advocate, pioneer of our community, will be the first Saturday in June, whatever that is, at the church at 2 p.m. in New Macedonia. I want to say that as the COVID winds down the vaccinations here at the city, we will continue with a medical team to go far and near to make sure that people who are not going to the drugstores or who are not coming to the city, that we can take the Pfizer, the one-and-done Johnson, and the Moderna directly to the community, to the churches, to the schools. We were at the university, at the college last Thursday. We'll be at the Boca campus tomorrow. But I want to talk about what happened Sunday night with Willie Spence. People speak up, silence gives consent. I cannot be quiet about what happened last night as it relates on Sunday night to our homeboy, Willie Spence. Young man, you are our American Idol. I also feel that Grace should have been in there right with you to the end. If you and Grace ever hook up, you all will take this country like a powerful windstorm. To the American Idol executives, it is time to make some changes to your rules and format. At the end of the day, this competition should not be based upon a popularity contest, but rather predicated upon quality, not quantity. Maybe you need to expand your classifications and perhaps evolve to American Idols and not Idol. Willie and Grace should be our new American Idols. I will be in Los Angeles on Monday. We hope to meet and speak to the executives and the producers. Wrong. It's a travesty of justice, as what happened to Willie Spence. This city supported it. Now it's time for we to stand up and let them know that this was wrong, it wasn't right, it wasn't fair, it was unjust, and we just need to say something about it. And if I'm going to say something directly to them in Los Angeles on Monday. We ask you for your prayers that I make this trip. I'm not going for that purpose, but while I'm there, I am definitely going to let them know how I feel. And hopefully you will send emails and do whatever you can to let American Idols know it's time for a change. And what happened to Willie Spence should never happen again. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, sir. Are we clear on the next steps for this project?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, very good. Discussion by the executive director. Mr. Evans?
Yes, Madam Chair. Before I get into my comments, I would like for Ms. Anita Jenkins to provide you an update with regards to Berkeley Landing. We've had some great conversations and that project is moving forward, but there's been some time since the board has had an update in a public forum, so I'll ask Ms. Jenkins to provide you a brief update.
Yes, go ahead.
Just to let you know, the Berkeley Landing Development Team has been engaged in several site plan submission meetings with our city staff. And just kudos to Development Services. Those meetings, Development Services, our city engineer, management, those meetings have gone beautifully. Much discussion. City staff has assisted with making corrections to the site plan to make sure that it met with our zoning requirements, et cetera. And the developer has adjusted the site plan for open space and other things. The site plan is still beautiful. They are ahead of schedule, and I hope they are okay with my saying that. They want to under-promise and over-deliver. So things are ahead of schedule. They're looking forward to closing with the state later on in the year and breaking ground shortly thereafter. They're doing everything they can to move the timeline up. And perhaps at one of our next meetings or by email, I might share with you the current site plan that's making its way through the city's process. We still have the number of units. We still have our parking. The beautification and the sculpture is coming along. There have been several meetings with FDOT about the median cuts, et cetera, and there were some issues that were resolved that met with the city requirements. The developer was happy at the end of the day, and we're going to have a beautiful project that we're going to break ground on before this year ends.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, with regards to a couple of items that I wanted to update the board on, as it relates to Marina Phase 2, city staff did bring forward, CRA staff did bring forward a list of consultants to get authorization from the board to proceed forward with conducting businesses with these 3 consultants. We are requesting for the 3 consultants to provide us with a price as well as a timeline to go ahead and review the financial documents that would be provided by the developer for the purposes of completing the analysis that we know the board wants to move forward. So as soon as we get that information back from the 3 consultants that went through the competitive solicitation process, we will bring the #1 ranked consultant to the board for consideration and execution. We're also moving forward with the parking study. We're in the final stages of completing the parking study on Marina Phase 2. The developer has provided us with information related to their prospective needs, as well as staff has accommodated the study as providing for what our current needs and what we anticipate the future needs is. So that study should be completed in the coming weeks. And then one item that we need to bring before the board at your next meeting is to have a discussion with regards to the Florida Housing Finance Corporation program that Berkeley Landing went through, because it is staff's understanding that the board conceivably agreed to, in principle, the process that would allow for the developers from Marina Phase 2 to participate in the Florida Housing Finance Corporation tax credit program. And if in fact that's the case, we need confirmation from the board that that is the direction, because that is a major linchpin in the particular project. And as it relates to funding and the local area match, we would need to have the board's confirmation that that's the direction you want to go, or if you would want us to go through the process that we went through in Berkeley Landing, because conceivably we can only move forward with one project. So that's a major decision that's going to have to come back before this board, and most likely will come to you at your next regular meeting. Also at your next regular meeting, we did have anticipated bringing forward to you the interview and selection process for the legal representation for the Community Redevelopment Agency. We will bring that information to you all for consideration. Probably towards the end of this week, we'll actually release the packet associated with that, so you can have a little bit more time with the documents concerning the solicitation and read through those proposals, so you can be prepared for the discussion when that comes back before you. Of course, thank you to all the CRA and city staff that did an exceptional job in coordinating the Willie Spence event. Obviously, it didn't turn out as we would have hoped, but nonetheless, I think staff did an amazing job, and we've gotten a lot of praise throughout the county, and a lot of our municipal partners were cheering us on as well. And so certainly an unfortunate outcome, but nonetheless, we would love to host Mr. Spence here in some capacity at some event to really give him the hero's welcome that I think he deserves. That's a tough competition, and to place our community on a national spotlight for amazing things is always something that we should celebrate in our community. So hopefully the families listening in, we'd love to have the conversation to bring him to his true home and have a real event that celebrates his talent and his commitment to the craft, because it takes a lot of effort and a lot of no's before you get to that point where he got. So we're certainly proud of him. And then we are excited about a major announcement that we will be able to provide to the community related to the commercial facility, or the industrial facility on the corner of President Obama and 13th. We've been working with the Business Development Board for a prospective tenant that would go into that particular space, and we've gotten positive remarks today that they are all good to go. So as soon as we can share it with the public as it relates to who it is, we'll be excited to share that, and that will be a great addition to the corporate citizens that we have here in Riviera Beach. Madam Chair, that concludes my comments.
Thank you, sir. I wanted to ask you, is the parking study going to be reviewed by the consultants as well, since it's tied to the proposed Phase 2 project?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
There is a consultant, an independent consultant that the city did hire, the CRA did hire to conduct the study. So they're having the discussion with both parties, but they're independent and separate and apart from the development group. So I don't think the financial consultants are going to look at the parking study. That's something that we can provide to them, but that consultant that we utilize for the parking study, that's exactly what their scope and responsibility is, and we've utilized them in the past.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So it's the CRA attorney.
I have no
Counsel.
comments.
General Counsel?
No, I'm sorry. I have no comments. Thank you.
All right, very good. Statements from the commission, starting with Commissioner Lawson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, just to echo the sentiments of Mr. Evans, amazing job by staff putting this event together. We received rave reviews as a city for what was done for our hometown hero, Willie Spence. He is our American Idol, so we are going to continue to honor him, support him, and actually, as a business mindset, he actually received the better end of the deal, even though it's disappointing to our residents here in the community, knowing that he didn't become the actual titled American Idol. He's not locked into the American Idol contract, and personally, it's going to be more lucrative for him when it comes to his career, because he is an amazing star and he's going to represent the city very well. So congratulations to him. his mom, Miss Sharon, and the rest of the family. Congrats to you all, and thank you to the city as well. Your work was amazing for that event. That's something that we all as a council and colleagues came together and said this is something we want to do. And when we all are on the same page and supportive of just focusing on the city, those amazing things are what happened. So thank you, colleagues. Thank you, staff. Thank you, Mr. Evans.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner McCoy?
Question, Ms. Jenkins, Mr. Evans, what is, I think I tried to ask by email, but what's the purpose of the proposed joint meeting with the city, CRA, CDC?
I believe that Mr. Evans was proposing the meeting so that there could be a formal dialogue between the CDC, CRA, city, and I believe the Housing Authority was also invited to talk about what the agencies do, how they work, what are some of the priorities and projects, and be able to have a dialogue with commissioners. And, there was a question about, what's the linkage between the CDC and the CRA, and perhaps having Mr. Haygood talk about how the CDC came about, et cetera. So that was the purpose, just starting to make sure that we are being open and transparent, that we're sharing information with the community, that we're helping to work together to establish priorities when it comes to community development and housing here in the city of Riviera Beach. And Mr. Evans, if I misspoke or if you have anything to add.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
Ms. Jenkins was absolutely right. We want to create for the dialogue to commence and then to create the synergy, because we're all looking conceivably to capture the same lightning in a bottle, to create for workforce housing in our community and to be on the same page as it relates to economic development activities and where are portions of our community that we want to emphasize and focus our efforts. So the intent behind it is to have a collegial discussion and to really set the tone as we move forward, because as we talk about workforce housing and affordable housing, we don't have a situation on the city side where we're conceivably putting monies aside as part of the budget appropriation process to facilitate that. And so when we have that conversation, the intent is how do we carry it into subsequent discussions on the budget and really put an effort on the city side to attempt to address some of the concerns that the CRA is doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Botel?
Thank you. Well, I'm happy to announce that today I was appointed to the board of the Palm Beach County League of Cities, and I'm also going to serve on the Land Use and Economic Development Advisory Commission for the League. I want to mention that I've begun a dialogue with Principal Corey Brooks from Dwyer, and the We Are Dwyer Foundation, a woman by the name of Julie Litke-Rubin, has been in touch with me to see what we can do about improving the educational experience for the Riviera Beach kids who go to Dwyer. We know that they take a long trip in the morning and again in the afternoon to get up there, and we want to try to make that trip and the whole experience better for them. So I'll be discussing that with Corey Brooks and that group. We have our Singer Island Town Hall tomorrow night at 6 o'clock, both virtually and in person at the Ambassador Center. And we welcome you. If you are interested in coming, please email stbrown@rivierbeach.org so that we know how many seats to set out. We also are planning a World Oceans Day. The United Nations has named June 8th as this year's World Ocean Day, and we'll be celebrating on the 8th by having a series of videotapes, short videotapes, from a number of the partners that we have in that endeavor, including the Oceanographic Institute that we have here, the Terrace Oceanographic Institute, the Loggerhead Marine Life Center, the Florida Fishing Academy, the Palm Beach County Marine Institute, and so on. So that'll be an exciting thing on June 8th, and then we'll celebrate in person on June 13th, which is a Sunday. So we'll be in the afternoon after church time, and that'll be over at the Ocean Walk Mall, and we've got all kinds of exciting things like lionfish cooking exhibitions and the like, and hopefully some music and some fun. That'll be a lot of fun. I also promise you that I will have my legislative aide, happens to be cousin of Willie Spence, reach out to the family and see if we get him to perform or be in some kind of an event here in the city. And I want to add my thanks to the city staff and the CRA staff. Sunday was just a fabulous event. You know, Willie Spence may not have won American Idol, but he certainly won our hearts, and the staff staff of the CRA and the city put their best foot forward. It was just a great event, and I am thankful to everyone who participated. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Kashama Miller Anderson.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, send condolences to Mr. Earl Davis's family. I know he's been around quite a bit in the city of Revere Beach, and I know he's helped quite a few of us, maybe, or others, on their campaigns over the years, and he really took great pride in participating. Yes, that's what Bishop just said.
He passed away?
Yes, this morning, I believe.
My.
So I just want to send condolences to his family, and of course, the American Idol. I think everybody's pretty much covered it. I echo those same sentiments. Thank you so much.
No, I didn't know. And
it's like finding that on Facebook.
I know, right? Good Lord. Yeah, condolences to his family. I know Mr. Davis very well. In fact, about 3 weeks ago, I took him some fruit because he said he wanted some bananas and some oranges. Lord, very good. I just wanted to thank Mr. Evans, especially Dr. Botel and Sammy Brown for making sure that this event on Sunday was just the best. It was very well attended. It was the ambiance, the atmosphere, the people who were there. It was just a beautiful experience. And on top of that, the weather was nice. So it was a very good experience. I'd also like to, Mr. Evans, to have the CDC to present to the public about what it is, who runs the CDC, who the people who are involved with it, what they do, how they're involved with the city, so that the public knows this is about, almost $3 million from CRA that's going into this organization, and the public should know about who it is and what it does. So at the next meeting, I would like to see the CDC have a presentation to our residents, because ultimately, all of this is their money.
Is it 3 million? I thought it was only 900,000 plus.
Yeah, but I'm sure as that's just not the only project that the CDC is doing for the CRA.
Oh, okay.
And I'm talking, sir. And thank you so much, again, Mr. Evans, for your hard work and for all of the things that you have accomplished since you have arrived back at our city. I'm amazed every day at the work that you have been able to complete, given the naysayers and the haters. I really appreciate your confidence and the fact that you keep this train moving, and that we have accomplished so much in this short period of time being on the dais, and it's really due to your persistence and your outlook and how we can really get this city moving. So thank you so much for your help, and we are adjourned.
Thank you.